There comes a time in every gamer's life when you look back at the shameful cluster of games forgotten by time in your Steam library, collecting dust, and instead of going for one more match or replaying Skyrim for the millionth time, only to end up as a stealth archer yet again, you actually pick up one of these ancient artifacts and finally give it the time that it deserves. Well friends, that time has come once again for me. So gather around the fire and let me tell you a tale that you all probably know. But that's kind of the point. These are my Backlog Chronicles, the series where I try to cross names out of my embarrassing backlog whilst making a video out of it to delude myself into being productive and steadily grow my YouTube channel because I was too stupid to pick a safer career choice. Today's episode is Borderlands 3. The game that managed to trash the reputation of this iconic franchise way before the disaster that was the Borderlands movie. Or at least that's what I heard about the game back when it launched. So considering that Borderlands 4 is set to release this year, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to see for myself what is actually up with Borderlands 3 and more importantly, how it faced the test of time. Is the hate warranted? Did the game manage to find its footing years later after its shaky release? Should this game even be remembered? Now that I'm saying this out loud, I think that is actually the best question to find the answer for. See, the purpose of the Backlog Chronicles is almost entirely selfish. I want to go back and play some games that I let slip through my fingers, whilst forcing myself to make a video out of it to justify the time spent not being quote-unquote productive. Think of it like a tax write-off but for my moral conscience. That being said, considering that I'm heading into my mid-20s and I'm becoming a proud owner of the Ankh status, my perception regarding this process has also shifted alongside my neurological capacity. I might have reached my peak in that department many years ago, but that's another thing. The point is, as new generations of gamers keep on venturing into this wonderful medium, the catalog of older games that must be played becomes grander by the day, and they need a little guidance. So there is a selfless aspect to the series after all, or at least that's what I tell myself to fall asleep at night. Bruh, the fact that many kids' first GTA is going to be 6 makes me sick to my stomach. To put into perspective, I'm a 2000 baby, and I was almost that guy that never experienced Resident Evil 4 if it weren't for one of my good friends that recommended it to me, and I was alive when the game came out. I would have probably been fine just playing the remake, but now that I've played the original, I think that experience is quintessential because that game is somehow 10 out of 10 and a must play while having tank controls. Now, imagine being born in 2025 and you never go back to Portal, Half-Life, Left 4 Dead. Yeah, some people will probably never know how iconic Valve used to be. What I'm trying to get at is that there needs to be discourse surrounding older games, so that people that might not even have heard of them can find out about these games and decide for themselves if they want to have these experiences. But it's not only about the kids, I'm not Diddy. This is about gamers that might also consider erasing some games from their backlog, but the time investment is an important factor that needs to be taken into consideration. And that's what I'm doing with this series, looking out for your best interests by telling you if the game is worthy of your time and also your backlog. Moreover, it's a win for me if you have also played the game, because we get to discuss in the comments whether we agree or disagree about the overall perception. Either way works for me. But I think that's enough context about the series itself, don't you think? It would be best if we just get straight into the meat and potatoes. That being said, is Borderlands 3 worthy of a spot in your backlog? Nah, not really. But yeah, if you're a fan of the series, so let's start with that. At the core of the Borderlands series, there has always been 3 key elements that define the franchise: the art style, the humor, and the guns. These characteristics put together gave Borderlands its iconic identity and made it stand out as the looter-shooter genre has become more and more oversaturated over the years. These are the reasons for the popularity of Borderlands, which was horribly mismanaged as it led to the Borderlands movie, but we do not talk about it. If you think about it, it's kind of depressing that this would probably be the only chance Gearbox had to attract non-gamers to the franchise, and also a spit in the face to the fans that stuck with the series and made it this popular in the first place. When people saw the cel-shaded look of Borderlands 1 for the first time, they knew they were in for a good time. And they were right, that's what Borderlands 1 was, a really good time. It was gun corn at its finest, and the vibrant visuals and the great comedic writing were the cherries and the sprinkles added on top. These three core elements made everybody laugh and shoot their way through the game without paying that much attention to the fact that the story was just serviceable and that the ending was kind of anticlimactic, or that the characters were pretty monotone and were carried by the writing. Everyone was just too busy having a blast, but then Borderlands 2 came and fucked everything up. You know the three core parts of Borderlands I can't stop mentioning? Well, they were all improved by the second installment. However, they were not what made the game memorable. Borderlands 2 just had to introduce a new element to the table by the name of Handsome Jack. This motherfucker made Borderlands 2 one of the best games that year, and the competition was stacked. Suddenly, the story was one of the highlights of the game because it revolved around one of the best written villains in all video games. Just give me your Mount Rushmore of video game villains. Who do you have on there? GLaDOS, Sephiroth, Ganondorf, and Bowser? Fuck Bowser, Handsome Jack should be on there. You have this charismatic psychopath that taunts you the entire game, and you cannot help but despise his ass in a lovable manner.
Seeing the problem here, you're still alive. So if you could just do me a favor and off yourself, that'd be great.
Borderlands 2 gave us more guns, more things to shoot these guns at, whilst improving the visuals and the jokes. But the one thing that made it stuck in my brain was the story, surprisingly. It brought back all the iconic characters from the first game and gave them proper development, whilst also introducing new future mascots of the series. Bro, one DLC from Borderlands 2 was so good they made an entire game out of it. I haven't played it, but my point still stands. What I'm trying to say is that Borderlands 2 is in the same conversation about goated video game sequels as Uncharted 2 or Arkham Asylum. It managed to secure this spot by improving everything, especially the story, but in retrospective, that might have been lightning in a bottle. We have finally arrived at the actual culprit of today's video. Sorry for the delay. In order to determine if Borderlands 3 is a worthy backlog edition or not, you need to have a minimal understanding of what made its predecessor special. Having established that, we can now take a look at what was lost and what was gained in the third installment of this iconic franchise. When I do a review for a brand new game, I usually like to structure my video by focusing on each element of the game, such as the world or the progression. Well, I'm not going to do that here because there is not that much to touch upon. It is an open zone game with large areas that can be explored that are separated by loading screens, and when you level up, you get skill points which you can allocate into a skill tree. See, I don't have to drag everything out in order to blow the size of my video for more watch time. Plus, a lot of you probably already played the game, so you wouldn't be interested in a full-blown review for a game that came out 6 years ago. And as I've already mentioned, that's not the point of this video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this video into two sections: why you should and shouldn't play Borderlands 3. That way it is easier for someone to decide for themselves if this game is worth their precious time, when so many good games are constantly coming out. I hope my video is worth your precious time. Mwah, kiss you.
I kiss you on your forehead. Who you talking? Who you getting loud with? Hey, when we get home, I'm gonna kiss you on your forehead.
Coincidentally, both of these segments are summarized by the title because Borderlands 3 is both overhated and also undercooked. Let's dip our toes into the positives before we get to the controversial stuff. So let me tell you, remember the three core elements that make Borderlands special? I won't stop mentioning them until you appreciate this graph, and also hit the like and subscribe button. Well, you should play Borderlands 3 because it improved on basically all of them, with a caveat. Let's get the most obvious one out of the way. The game looks very good. You would think that by not going for realistic graphics, this iconic visual art style would start feeling outdated quickly, but it actually gets more impressive with each installment. The comic book look has never been so full of life as it is in Borderlands 3. The attention to detail makes every fabric of clothing and environmental texture pop. You can also see this aspect in the character design, as every subtle highlight or shadow makes the character models even more stunning than before, and all you want to do is just stare at this work of art to appreciate the effort the visual artists put into this.
Goo goo gaga, I want milk.
And the same thing can be said about the actual world. Like I said, I don't have that much to mention when it comes to the actual exploration and the world in general, you just drive around. But let me tell you, when it comes to the visual side of things, the environments are now probably one major highlight of the game. You truly get distracted by wallpaper material coming at you all the time. There are plenty of impressive vistas all around the map which will make you take a break for a second just to admire them. Moreover, the actual places where you will have endless gunfights are also visually impressive, and even more important than that, diverse, as you will transition from jungles and swamps to snowy mountains and deserts. Borderlands 3 embraces its art style even more than the previous two games, as it creates a beautiful painting out of its world. Shout out to the environmental designers, you did a hell of a job at making you want to play the game only based off looks. But it's not only about the looks, right? That's the story with all video games, or things in general. Unless you're one of those weird people that care deeply about the graphics. Good luck in a couple of years, dog, when the technology is going to get maxed out, so you will start comparing the graphics based on the hair follicle count. Oh, wait a second, you're already doing that. Anyway, like I said, it's not only about the looks with Borderlands. It's about the motherfucking guns.
Yeah, boy.
Gearbox is many bad things, but at the very least, it understands why people love Borderlands in the first place, and that reason is motherfucking guns. But Borderlands 3 has a lot of motherfucking guns. In case you didn't notice, the theme of this video is me repeating myself to highlight how Borderlands does the same thing. I mean, the gameplay formula didn't receive any noticeable change since the series started. And you know why? People don't care about that in Borderlands. They only care about getting more guns and shooting them. And Gearbox delivers every time, because as I said, shoving hella guns down people's throats will make them too busy to care about the underperforming areas of the game. And you know what? I am not ashamed to admit that this strategy kind of works on me.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
I had a lot of fun with Borderlands 3, only because I got to shoot thousands of crazy maniacs with the most over-the-top guns the series has ever seen. We have everything in the Bible here and then some. I don't know the design process that goes into creating the guns in Borderlands, but at this point I think it might be randomly generated. Or the developers just do a bunch of drugs and start spitballing until there are no more coherent words coming out their mouth, and they stick with the key words that were shouted the loudest. Corrosive automatic sniper rifles, electric bouncing grenades, freezing charging shotguns, or get this, gun that shoots guns. Yeah, imagine the thought process behind that one. Gearbox went full self-aware when they made the gun, because you know what's better than shooting bullets? Shooting guns, obviously, as if there was gun drought in this game already and we needed more. Did I mention there was a lot of guns in this game? And I mean a lot. There are so many I could not justify sticking to some that I loved using because I wanted to try more. And this feeling stuck with me through the entire duration of the game. I'm the same guy that sticks with the first horse in Red Dead Redemption because I value the long-term bond. But here, I didn't have any bond with my guns. Maybe next time they should make them speak like in Cyberpunk. I felt like a kid playing Borderlands 3 because I would gravitate towards all the new shiny things and throw out the old ones like Andy did to Woody. And the screen is always crowded by crazy amounts of shiny stuff, especially if you turn up the mayhem mode, which increases the difficulty but also increases the amount of loot that you get. As soon as you unlock this, you immediately have to turn it on, not only because it makes every enemy explode into loot, and every fight gets even more chaotic as you try to figure out who's actually shooting at you whilst navigating piles of riches like Scrooge McDuck, but also because the game itself is very easy and you need to increase the difficulty by any means necessary in order to feel some type of challenge. I played on normal, but I swear to God that felt like baby mode. Even on mayhem mode I would still one-shot enemies in the late game, and boss fights would last 2 seconds, so I would resort to use all the less overpowered guns that I had, which worked perfectly because I ended up using even more guns and had more fun. But it's still a little icky when you have to handicap yourself so you experience the game the way it was intended. And you know how Borderlands was intended to be played? With your friends. Completing Borderlands 2 with one of my friends back when we were in high school cemented that game as one of the most fun experiences I have ever had with video games, period. And that's because shooting guns is fun, but shooting guns with friends is always even more fun. Creating a strategy and coordinating yourselves to take down a late game boss or just fighting over who gets the legendary gun is how the game was always meant to be played. That being said, unfortunately for me, I don't have any friends that play Borderlands anymore, so I had to experience this one alone, and I'm not gonna lie, my experience was worsened. But not that drastically that the game became boring, like Dying Light. Just kidding, or not. But if you're going to play with your friends, Borderlands 3 is worth your backlog, I can tell you that straight up. But if it somehow isn't, do yourself a favor, grab these friends of yours, crack a couple of cold ones, watch this video, and every time I say the word gun, you drink. By the end, you will all be wasted enough to convince each other to buy this game and shoot your way through the world of Borderlands, especially when the shooting itself is satisfying here. Look, first-person shooters are an obsolete genre at this point because Doom exists. I might make a video about that when the Dark Ages come around. You cannot mechanically do shooters better than Doom, that's a fact. The least you could do is add a bunch of extra shit here and there to spice up the formula, and that's what Borderlands 3 does. Although it improved the gameplay on a technical level, as the shooting feels more precise, more fluid and snappier than it was in the previous titles, the differentiating factor that separates this game from the competition are the guns, but you already knew that because I told you. Don't forget to drink. Besides those, the gameplay is elevated by the individual abilities each character can use. There are 4 main Vault Hunters, as per usual, and also as per usual, each one is distinctly unique to diversify the gameplay experience and make the game more replayable. Every protagonist also comes with their own unique skill trees and abilities, emphasizing player choice, and their purpose is to ensure that the game doesn't become stale, as the gameplay loop is only shooting, and when you do that for 40 hours, you need to add some variety to the combat, unless you want to get bored. I played as Flak, which is, in my controversial opinion, a better take on Zero from Borderlands 2 because he can too turn invisible and do massive critical damage, but on top of that, he's funnier and has a better personality than Zero. Please don't shoot me. I will try to defend myself in a bit. Speaking of funny, remember the caveat I mentioned earlier? Yeah, that's the humor.
What's up, bitches?
Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
Look, this subject is tricky to approach because, as we all know, comedy is subjective.
I am become meme. Yeah, pretty much.
I cannot classify something as unfunny because it didn't make me laugh. It might amuse another person. So, in our case, Borderlands 3 is Schrodinger's joke. It lives in a state where it is simultaneously hilarious and also cringe. There are a lot of dry moments in the game, but there are also some other hilarious moments. To give you an example, there was a quest where I was tasked with attending a funeral for someone's kid, and throughout this funeral, you can either tarnish the dead kid's legacy by beating every record they set when they were alive, or you can be the better person and indulge the father by respecting their child's memory. I couldn't stop laughing whilst destroying this grieving father by treating his child's funeral like a competition. And there are plenty of moments like this in the game when the humor happens to hit you out of nowhere and you find yourself giggling or laughing uncontrollably.
Just take me home, you shit-dip tortilla chip!
Borderlands 3 tries to capitalize on everyone's sense of humor by trying all sorts of jokes in order to satisfy as many people as possible, so the entire experience is basically held by your own sense of humor. It might hit, it might not hit. One thing that doesn't help Borderlands 3 case in this department, and also can be somewhat objectively judged, is unfortunately the writing, because it is the main reason of You remember how I glazed the story of Borderlands 2 and I stated that it might have been lightning in a bottle? Yeah, Borderlands 3 confirmed this aspect, and I hope that Borderlands 4 doesn't set it in stone. Not only am I a firm believer that the story of Borderlands 2 was an accidental masterpiece, but I also think it was the worst thing that could have happened to Gearbox, because it set an unrealistic precedent that couldn't be matched again. I think the developers tried to recreate what made the story successful, but they completely missed the mark, because they just didn't get it. They were like, okay, the fans love psychotic annoying cunts as villains and crude satirical writing, so go balls to the walls on all of that. Well, on behalf of the Borderlands community, I'm here to inform Gearbox that wasn't it, chief. If you want to replicate the feeling you had whilst playing the story of the previous game, you shouldn't play this one, because the story of Borderlands 3 is bad in 3 big departments: the pacing, the character focus, and the villains. Let's explore each one of them to highlight why the story is such a letdown. The pacing of the story is all over the place, and I'm not referring to the fact that you get to explore multiple planets. The game builds up to a climatic point. It happens, everything comes to a crawl. The game accelerates towards a moment of tension, it explodes, then quickly burns out. This series of events happens throughout the entire game. It feels like you're driving a car, then you fuck up the clutch and your car dies, so you restart the car, and you fuck up the clutch again. The car dies, so you restart the car, and you do this process non-stop, and by the end, it feels like you never left the parking lot. No moment of tension is given importance because the game jumps immediately to the next story beat, and there is no moment of relaxation because the pace has to ramp up again to catch up with the plot. This back and forth makes everything one note because the game doesn't let you process anything. Let me give you 2 examples. One that perfectly highlights this problem, and one that shows how it can actually be done in the right way. Obvious spoilers for this 6-year-old game. So, the big event that got everyone mad with Borderlands 3, and I see now why, is Maya's death. Let me be clear, I am not upset that Maya died. We have had serious deaths in the series before. However, unlike with Roland, the player doesn't get the chance to grieve this time. Maya dies, there is a moment of silence, and then the game moves on as if one of the protagonists from the previous game didn't get Thanos snapped. All the characters react to the initial event, and then they're fine. That's why people don't like Ava. I personally don't dislike Ava, and I don't get why she would be dragged so much, but I understand why people would have a problem with her. She basically gets Maya killed, then plays the victim card, making this thing about herself, and she faces no consequences. It's annoying to see, but she's a kid. She's supposed to be dumb and immature. That's why I think this is fitting for her character. If I was a Maya main, yeah, I would probably get pissed as well, but not because of Ava, but because the game itself disrespected my girl, or actually Krieg's girl. Yeah, to be fair, the game actually kind of corrects this mistake in Krieg's DLC by making Maya a big part of it, and you get that consolation you were robbed of in the base game. So water under the bridge? Kind of. The pacing is still ass, and the next example perfectly captures why. So after killing Troy, one of the Calypso twins, which are the villains. I will get to them in a bit, don't you worry. You get hit with a cliffhanger ending, setting up Tyreen as the main antagonist in the next game. However, this was a fake out ending and the game resumes. This was one brilliant moment in the game. It builds up the action to a climatic boss fight, and then you get the rug swept under your feet as everything stops in its tracks to set up the actual final boss fight. The pacing works here because it basically makes fun of itself, and because you cannot repeat this for the entire duration of the game, they destroy the rest of the story by overdoing this bit and in an unironic fashion. That's why the pacing doesn't work. They milked this until it was dry. When it comes to the characters, first of all, please explain to me in the comments why would you crash out over Ava besides her being a bratty child? I'm generally curious. Second of all, Gearbox, please explain to me why did you focus your story around Lilith again? Why did you bring all the protagonists from the first game but you don't do the same with the ones from Borderlands 2? Why did you bring back Tina and only gave her 5 minutes of screen time? I swear to God, the writers of Borderlands 3 pick and choose their favorite characters and they keep shoving them down our throats, like Tannis. Bro, I think she gets more focus here than Claptrap, and he's the fucking mascot at this point. Look, I like Tannis as a character, that's not the problem, but why can't we focus on other people that didn't receive that much attention in the past? Like Moxie? Just kidding. No, we focus on fucking Lilith again. Or fuck it, why not introduce new characters and develop them instead? The only character that stuck with me after I finished the game was Jacobs, but he was held by being associated with Hammerlock, which was already an established character, so it doesn't really count. You know how Borderlands 2 introduced a new character, then proceeded to make an entire DLC around her, and then a whole game? Well, Borderlands 3 decided to bring back this character only to underutilize her with no shame. I'm obviously talking about Tiny Tina. She was one of the best parts of the previous installment, and now that she's grown up, you can explore so much more regarding her development, but you don't do any of that, Gearbox. Why? You know what Borderlands 3 is? It is a constant barrage of member berries. Like, hey, do you remember this character that you loved and also this one? It's nostalgia bait through and through, but the worst part is that the game is not even consistent at that. I told you how they bring back Tina and she's barely in the game. They also bring back Brick and Mordecai again, and they are also barely in the game. That would be fine if they didn't completely ignore Axton and Salvador from 2. Maybe that's self-awareness, I guess, because they were weak characters in the first place, but they could have been elevated instead of forgotten. They kind of show up, but I have to buy the Ultimate Edition of the game to do a quest with them. Fuck you, Gearbox, I'm not doing that. I already bought the deluxe version of the game that contains all the expansions. Why the fuck doesn't it contain everything? But hey, I guess the glass is also halfway full because Borderlands 3 surprisingly brings back Reese and Vaughn from Tales from the Borderlands by Telltale Games. I might make a video about that game one day because it might be the best story in the Borderlands universe, period, and I'm glad they made everything canon by connecting the game to the main entries through the addition of Reese and Vaughn. Wait, I guess that already happened in the DLC from 2. Anyway, it's still based that they included them. I only wish Troy Baker could have returned to voice Reese.
The cops can't catch this! Later, you bourgeois sucker!
Another example that shows how member berries can be good is the DLC. If we're excluding Tiny Tina's DLC, the Borderlands 3 expansion package might be better than Borderlands 2's. And that's because they focused on characters who were previously neglected, like Handsome Jack's clone or Gage. At first I was upset because they decided to make another DLC centered around Hammerlock, but after playing it, that was fire and I'm glad they did it, exploring his relationship with Jacobs.
You're gay! He's gay!
See, when used sparingly and for proper development, member berries work, but Borderlands 3 overdoes them to death, and that comes at the detriment of new characters that could have stole the show. Luckily for me, I picked the correct Vol Hunter to play as, and my entire experience benefited because of my choice. Black stole the show for me. I cannot give my opinion on the other 3 protagonists as I didn't play as them, but I've heard they're wherever. When I told you that I think he's a superior take on Zero, I wasn't lying. I love Flack, although Zero returns here and he's as cool as ever. Flack is as cool as Zero in terms of aesthetics and abilities because they're both robots that can turn invisible. Well, now that I think about it, I don't think Zero is actually a robot, but fuck it, close enough.
I want you to give it up for Robo Bitch.
Flack just brings more to the table because his demeanor is so sarcastic and unbothered with a sprinkle of sadistic tendencies on top. Like for real, every situation is not that big of a deal for him, as he finds everything unserious or even beneath him, especially when it comes to empathy.
The old one requires false teeth.
I don't know what the flaming crap you're talking about.
That's why he kind of narrows out Zero, and this is coming from a Zero main back in Borderlands 2, so you know this is a big deal. I need to give the writers credit when credit is due, because they did Flack's character justice. That being said, I don't think these are the same writers that also wrote the villains.
What's up, bitches?
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Well, we have finally arrived at the big point that makes me not want to recommend Borderlands 3. And if you played the game, you know that the Calypso twins are a huge issue. These are the prime example of why I think Gearbox tried to replicate the success of Borderlands 2 by creating a narrative that is aggressively centered around the main antagonist, or antagonists in our case. Not only that, they tried to clone Handsome Jack. I mean, they technically did that with Timothy, and he shows up in one of the DLC as I've mentioned, which is a cool callback to the pre-sequel, but I didn't refer to that. The developers tried to make another loudmouth psychopath that constantly belittles the player, driving you to desperately want to kill them. Well, they split this fictional villain into one-note characters that cannot be distinguished from one another, and not because they're twins, and they also forgot to make them charismatic. You know what made Handsome Jack be so detestable yet so lovable to the point that he could make you jump off a cliff willingly?
I will pay you to kill yourself. Okay. I guess you just killed yourself.
It was his charisma, it was his wit, it was his intelligence. You wanted to shoot him in the face, but damn if you didn't laugh when he mentioned Butt Stallion.
That just feels immature. Hey, maybe Butt Stallion? Nah, that's even worse. I'll tell you what, I'll give it some more thought.
Well, yeah, the same things don't apply to the Calypso twins. They are literally the same character, and their only personality trait is that they're annoying. Not even Joffrey level of annoying, they're just icky. All they do is film themselves doing cringy shit and roasting every character that interacts with them. The only motivation for you to kill them is to make the pain stop. They are the satirical representation of the modern influencer. However, there is one big problem with Borderlands 3, and I can't believe I didn't figure it out sooner. Borderlands 3 doesn't understand satire. You know how I figured that out? There is this side quest nearing the end of the story that resembles an unfinished game, and you're forced to endure a slow-ass trailing mission, and the game keeps dragging this on and on by adding bugs and ridiculous objectives, forcing you to pay to get this done much quicker. This is the most obvious satire to a Ubisoft game. I'm not entirely kidding, check out my Assassin's Creed Shadows critique. This makes fun of unfinished buggy messes that push predatory consumer tactics. On paper, this sounds funny, but in execution, you are stuck in this never-ending quest for a long-ass time, and by the end, you figure out that this is not satirical if it forces you through it. You cannot make fun of something by becoming that thing. In Gearbox's defense, Borderlands as a whole is far from being an unfinished product that thrives on predatory monetization, but this quest is that. And even worse, this is the case for our main antagonists. The writers didn't understand satire when creating the Calypso twins. If they wanted to create annoying characters that make fun of cringy influencers, they failed because they created cringy influencers. As I've mentioned, it's not satire when you transform into the thing you're making fun of. That's hypocritical. Satire is done when you intelligently dismantle the thing you're trying to criticize. You either die as a satire or you live long enough to see yourself become the joke itself. That's why people cannot stand the Calypso twins, because they're programmed to do that, and ironically, this results in the player's reaction blowing up in Gearbox's face. On a general note, hopefully this game doesn't blow up in your face if you do decide to try it. I think that the core of the game is stable enough to be a fun experience for most players, especially Borderlands fans. The game is gorgeous, and shooting guns endlessly somehow doesn't get old, as you keep craving to find more guns to shoot. I am not a Borderlands expert to identify how the progression or the late game grind differs from the previous titles, but I'm assuming that you have already played the game if you cared about these aspects, in which case, let me know how was your experience. On the other hand, the writing doesn't help the weak story because it is forced most of the time, and it basically begs the player to laugh at every nonsensical thing happening on the screen. It's self-aware to the point that it's annoying, like a comedian that thinks they're funny. But as I've said, comedy is subjective, so you might get more amusement out of this, I don't know. If I sum up most reviews on Steam, they will all tell you the same thing. The gameplay part is great and the reason to play the game, and the story drags the quality down. I've tried to focus on both of these aspects to perfectly encapsulate the pros and the cons of Borderlands 3, in order to help you figure out if this game is worthy of that backlog spot. Because we both know it doesn't need to get any longer. Let me put it like this: if you've never played Borderlands before, please consider playing Borderlands 2, as that game is a genre-defying looter shooter and a must-play title for gamers in my opinion. If you loved Borderlands 2 and especially the shooting aspect, and if your backlog is looking skinny, sure, give 3 a chance, but I warned you about the story. If you have friends that are willing to spend a couple of bucks, because these games get ridiculously cheap on sales, I strongly recommend that you play all the titles in the franchise, because we all know that even bad games are fun with friends, and because these games are actually good enough, they might become some of the best experiences you can have gaming. I am saying this from experience. Nonetheless, the process of clearing your backlog should be stress-free, and your only motivation should be having fun, not out of obligation. I still want to make this series a collaborative endeavor by involving you guys. Last time I asked you to pick between a couple of suggestions and I actually got some answers, which I will be working on. But I had some free time between releases and I decided to check off Borderlands 3 before 4 comes out later this year. So if you want to help out clean up my backlog after I help you do the same thing, let me know if you want to see a video about the Metro, Horizon, Resident Evil or the Halo series. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to check out the previous episode of this series, which was about the Tomb Raider trilogy, or any other video on this channel that might best suit your taste. If you have any thoughts about the game, please feel free to share your opinion in the comments. If you've been watching this video for this long and you're still here, I cannot express my gratitude enough. It means the world to me. While you're here, please consider liking and subscribing to support the channel. It's not free, it will cost you your soul, but I'm telling you it's worth it. As always, your presence has been priceless, and I hope I get to see you in the next video. Take care.